Welcome, everyone, to the September 20th, 2022 City Council meeting of the City of Windom. This evening, on the agenda, we have the minutes from the Council of September 26th, Utility Commission August 31st and September 14th, Tree Commission September 7th, Community Center Commission September 12th, EDA September 12th, and the Library Board September 13th. Also included are the licenses for exempt gambling permits from applications from Des Moines River Ducks Unlimited, Bingo November 2nd, Business Arts and Recreation Center, and that will include Bingo October 25th and Bingo November 15th of 2022. Also included are the regular bills. Council wish to take action.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion Jim, second Jason. Any discussion or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. This evening, the first item is a proclamation recognizing Good Samaritan Society for 100-year anniversary. Quite an accomplishment. Thank you for taking the stand right away. And if the council doesn't mind, I'd like to read this with anticipation that somebody will gladly introduce it after that. City of Windom, Minnesota, proclamation recognizing the Good Samaritan Society for its 100-year anniversary. Whereas the Good Samaritan Society began its work on September 29th, 1922, and places a great value upon the well-being of the senior population. And whereas the Good Samaritan Society operates more than 200 locations in 24 states, whereas their ministries include housing and care for senior citizens and other persons in need, including independent living, assisted living, nursing home, and memory care facilities. Whereas nursing facilities offer supportive services that meet the unique personal needs of our older citizens, and they advance a mission of responsibility for them, a responsibility that we all share, by helping them live well and age well. And whereas we salute our citizens residing in Windom's Good Samaritan facilities and owe a special heartfelt thanks to all the employees of the Good Samaritan Society for their dedication to service. And whereas the aging of America is placing new demands on long-term care providers, and nursing home care is an integral part of America's healthcare system. Now there be it resolved by the City Council of Windom, Minnesota as follows. Recognize the 100-year anniversary of the Good Samaritan Society and its presence in Windom, adopted this 20th day of September 2022. Signed by Mayor Dominic Jones. Council?
I would like to introduce the resolution proclamation recognizing the Good Samaritan Society for its 100-year anniversary.
Second.
Introduced by Jenny and seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call.
Grunig,
Yes.
Sherman,
Yes.
Nelson, Quaid,
Yes.
Faring.
Yes.
Thank you all very much, and I'd like to present you with the proclamation. And I'd like to add that you had a very nice get-together through the COVID and all earlier this year, and it was great to see the seniors participate, and I do appreciate for you to ask the city to be part of it. Thank you.
On behalf of the Good Samaritan Society Windom, I want to thank the mayor and city council for the proclamation recognizing the Evangelical Lutheran Good Samaritan Society on its 100-year anniversary. In 1958, the Good Samaritan Society opened a nursing home here in Windom, and we have grown over the years to now include a 72-bed nursing home, a 24-unit assisted living, 28 independent living apartments, as well as our southwestern Minnesota home care agency that serves 250 clients in an 8-county area. Together, our service levels employ over 130 people. Thank you again for recognizing our special 100-year anniversary.
Very nice. Okay, next item. Once again, we have Edward Gilmore here. We have an application to consider. We'll have a public hearing in just a moment and this is in regards to the USDA fire equipment projects. This is a final one in our application process. So with that, do we want a brief overview? And Steve, maybe do you want to just go over the portions of this, the dollar amounts prior to the actual hearing taking place for the public that may be here?
Sure. This is for fire department equipment, as you noted, specifically the 6-wheeler replacement, boat replacement, and a first response truck. The grant amount in the pre-application was $125,000. Of this particular grant, USDA would be putting in 65 and being matched with 60,000 of city dollars. We can talk about funding it and how we'll cover our match maybe a little later after the hearing. We did set some money aside, not knowing we'd get all 3 grants this year, so we will have to look at doing some forward funding, but as I mentioned, we can get into that maybe after the public hearing. So
The one thing I'd add is it should be the intent that we're going to forward fund this, going in with accepting it, is my opinion. So with that, we will hear from the public at this time, and I will open the public hearing now. Public hearing is open. Is there anyone from the audience wish to comment? One more time for the audience here. Hearing none. Steve, any letters objecting? I wouldn't think so. This is a good project for the city of Windom, coming to fulfillment, and some of our really our emergency services departments. So we really appreciate this opportunity. So with that, hearing no more comments or any comments, we will close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. And Edward Gilmore, once again, is here if the council has any questions. And Edward can now take the stand for his part of it. And we have been through this. This will be our 3rd time, so I think we'll be able to hustle right through here and get you back east, I guess. So, before us, what we have to consider, I believe, and Edward will correct me if I'm wrong, approve the letter of conditions, letter of intent, operational budget, and obligation of funds, requests for obligation of funds. Any words before we act on these items, Ed?
I think the only thing is on the previous 2 letter of conditions look a little different. They updated the format we use, our national office did. So the same information is in it, it's just actually a little bit more concise in this format they have. One thing to point out, it says in here for equipment purchases, a 6 to 9 month time frame on completing all this stuff. That's a guideline really just to get the grant closed. If it takes longer than that to get the grant closed, it probably means you're waiting on me to send something. But really, we have a minimum of 3 years to spend the money. So that should give us more than enough time to it. And we can No, minimum, I'd say 3 years. We could probably do it out to 5 years if we had to, yeah. But yeah, for smaller things like this, 3 years should be plenty. But it's basically, if it goes out to 3 years, that's when the state office will start asking me what's going on with the project and stuff. So, kind of on the first page here, it spells out the max grant, or the grant amount is $65,000 on there. Section number 1, disbursement of funds on page 3, talks about the $60,000 from the city. It says to get, basically once, it kind of has a structure where if it's going to be a construction project, something bigger, before we got started with bids or something on that, we'd have you set up a separate fund and transfer the money in there, and that's not necessary on an equipment purchase like this. We've already seen the capability of doing that in the underwriting process, so that's complete. The only takeaway really is this, like the other ones, the $60,000 from the city, that's the first in money, then the grant dollars after that. Security requirement, again, just be the grant agreement. Insurance information's all basic stuff I'll get from Steve before we close the grant. Environmental, there's no effect as equipment purchase. One thing I mentioned, you do have to maintain the SAM.gov registration, which is normally a standard thing, but past few months, a lot of cities have had trouble renewing those. It's backlogged and stuff. So they want us to give every city a reminder to renew those as soon as possible, at least 2-3 months out before an expiration date. It's the only thing. So yeah, that covers it. So all 3 of these projects were aiming for $150,000, ended up with $170,000 total. So that should cover all the inflation from when we started to when we finished the stuff. So I think that's about it.
Okay, does the council have any questions for Ed before we get going?
Just, we do have our SAM's registration submitted. We actually did it today. And
Oh, okay.
We're about 60 days out, but we've got everything. There are some new requirements, and we've got some documentation that we submitted along with it. But
Okay,
it should be
great.
done and in process.
Great, that sounds good. Yeah, I think they switched over from the DUNS number to the UEI thing. So I don't know if that's what's slowing it down, but yeah, it's multiple cities have had issues with that. So I think sometimes they give you an extension, sometimes they don't, but.
You should see what happens when you get an address wrong. Anyway, okay, Steve, can we do these all in one?
Mr. Mayor, I think maybe we should talk about funding before we approve the actions on the letters of intent and obligation of funding. So, as I pointed out in the memo, we had set aside some funding in our capital plan last year, $126,975. We did have the turnout gear match, that was $55,000, and then we had the radio, which was the second USDA grant. There was $70,000 there. So if you put those two together, you're at 120, right at 125. Now we had 975 in there. When we did the budget last year, PD had asked for some radios that they needed, and so they actually went out and purchased 4. So some of this radio grant that we've got for that second grant fund is still part PD, part fire department, so we can still expend all the dollars, but some of them were purchased, and we know we can't count those. So that $20,000 we previously expended will not count towards our match. So just so you knew that. And so when you look at the memo, what I'm noting is, even though there's $60,000 for this particular match on the fire equipment, I'm asking you to forward fund $78,840, which then covers us for those expended funds for that radio. That's why the number's a little bit different than what you thought it was. When we were going through this at the last grant, I didn't realize that those dollars had been expended on those radios, and I thought we had that for match, but we don't and can't claim it because it was already committed. So just so you're aware of that, so. And our recommendation is to forward fund this out of 23 capital improvement plan, because you do have budget meetings coming up in the next month and a half. And so if you want to fund it some other way, we can certainly shuffle pots of money, but at this point, for kind of clarity and moving ahead, that was our suggestion, was to take it from forward funding capital, and you can have that discussion when you have your kind of budget meetings. You can really flesh it out maybe a little deeper than we're going to do today, so.
So Steve, you included a little later on some of the preliminary budget numbers. Is that included in there?
We included our normal amount that we put in for capital for general fund and special revenue funds. There's 210 in that budget, so that would easily cover the 78 that we're projecting here.
Okay, council have questions for Steve? One more time. Hearing no questions, is there a motion to approve the forward funding in the amount of 78,840?
I'd make a motion to accept the forward funding of the 78,000 and some for this, this matching grant.
I would second.
Motion to approve the forward funding in the amount as noted by Steve, and that was made by Jason and seconded by Marv. Any discussion on that? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So, with that, okay. Can we do that all in one? This would be to have myself and Steve sign off on the forms, the letter of conditions, letter of intent. Steve done the operational budget and the request for obligation of funds. Is there a motion to that extent?
I would make the motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Marv, second by Jim. Any discussion? With a lot of thanks to USDA, all in favor say, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I even voted. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks to all of USDA and the hard work that you guys do.
Thank you.
Yep. And I believe we already have you the signed agreements, right?
Yep, got it.
And, okay, you got her. All right, that's great. And I'm sure our two emergency services guys back here will appreciate it too, right, guys? Getting her done maybe a little faster than we thought, and I appreciate the council forward funding that to get some of these big ticket things completed. So once again, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, department heads. And Tim's coming out? Pardon me? Oh.
Tim Snyder, Community Center Director. I just wanted to plug a couple events, big events we got coming up to the Community Center. One of them is this Saturday. It's the Pheasants Forever Banquet. They kind of changed their ticket policy. It's all done online this year, and tonight is the last night to get your ticket. Go to pheasantsforever.org if you'd like to attend that event this Saturday. Thursday, September 29th, very happy about this. We're bringing in Chuck Foreman, Minnesota Viking legend, Hall of Famer for the Vikings, from 6 to 10. We've kind of reached out to some area football teams, and we're running into a lot of homecomings that week, but even the Miffle program of getting some young kids up there. And Chuck will be up signing autographs, pictures. We got some drawing for jerseys. And, you know, all this is possible due to 21 businesses that really step forward in their generosity has been overwhelming. One business leads me on to another one to talk to. So in a small community, it really shows how the businesses step forward to make a big event like this happen. And the last one is Saturday and Sunday, October 1st and 2nd, is the Wayne Carlson Gun and Knife Show up at the community center. Wayne was a longtime city employee, I believe, or run the grocery store. Yeah, the grocery store from that. Kyle, his son, has been putting on this gun show for the last few years, and really happy to have it back and in Wayne's. But there's a $5 admission charge for that, as well as for Chuck Foreman. It is a $5 admission fee to come in and see Chuck. But that's about it.
Sounds like a lot of great activities coming to the community center. Thank you, Tim. And for folks out there, make sure we get up and see Chuck Foreman. The Vikings could use a little bit of help after yesterday. So we'll welcome Chuck Foreman when he gets here. Okay, sounds good. Other department heads. No? Okay, we have a couple of exciting things here coming up. A resolution accepting donations. First one, Windom Quick Trip. This was to the Windom Police Department. I thought they did a great job accepting that donation out at the Quick Trip open house. So with that, I believe there is a resolution to authorize the city to accept a donation from Quick Trip in the amount of $1,000 to the Windom Police Department.
I'd introduce the resolution to accept the donation from Quick Trip to the Windom Police Department in the amount of $1,000.
I'll second.
That was introduced by Jason, seconded by Lisa. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Sherman,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Grunig,
Yes.
Farig,
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
And that carries. Thank you, Quick Trip. Next, we have a huge authorization to accept a donation for the Windom Community Center. This is from the Bob Byers estate. And this one is, I get that two numbers mixed up, is for $61,000. And so, without hesitation, would the city council like to introduce that?
I'll make a motion to introduce the acceptance of the $61,000 from the Bob Byers estate.
I'd second the resolution.
That resolution was introduced by Lisa and seconded by Jason. Any discussion? With thanks, a roll call, please.
Farig,
Yes.
Sherman,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Quaid,
Yes.
Grunig.
Yes.
And that resolution carries. In the community center, we can all speak for them. They'll be much appreciative of that donation. Next, from the Bob Byers estate is the resolution included. And this one is for $40,000 to the Windom Net. And so with that, does the council wish to take action on that resolution?
I would introduce the resolution accepting the donation from Bob Byers estate to City Windom Net.
I'll second.
Introduced by Marv, seconded by Lisa. Appreciate that. Any discussion? Hearing none. Steve, a roll call.
Nelson,
Yes.
Quaid,
Yes.
Farig,
Yes.
Grunig,
Yes.
Sherman.
Yes.
thank you very much. And for all of our donations tonight, how about a round of applause? That's very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think, very heartfelt thank you to the Byers family, Bob and Audrey, obviously very generous to the community, and I know they were proponents of the community center and patrons of that facility, and so it's a huge gift, and thank you very much, so.
Absolutely. Well said, Steve. Okay, moving on to the bid award for the transmission line reconstruction. And I believe Jason's gonna come up here. And one thing I caught, Jason, is, well, all I can say is you got under $3 million. I'll let you explain a little bit of the project for the council and then move from there.
So, back when I first started as line superintendent, this was one of the first project that was kind of laid out there, had been brought up at the commission before I even kind of started, which was right around that 2008 time period. So, been a long process, study, found that the life of the line is probably exceeded its expectations as far as long as it's lasted. It's been a very reliable line, but I'd like to replace it before it becomes unreliable, as it is our main source of power to the city of Windom. So DGR inspected it back in 19, deemed that its life was expired, and they kind of suggested we go down the path of trying to possibly reroute. So it got rerouted. Decided to go by our biggest user of it out there on 60. So if we ever needed to place a substation to serve them better, that would be a possibility now with the reroute. It's now going to go on the east side of the track, so we're going to get out of those parking areas of Ace Hardware, McDonald's. We're going to run it on the east side of the tracks, then jump over and run along the service road behind O'Reilly's, and then eventually we'll get into MnDOT's right away, heading east out of town on 60 there, and then tie back in to ITC. So we had a lot of bidders, 7. Steve was impressed with the number of bidders we had. The range was pretty wide. We did have 2 in that lower bid range though, so that made us feel pretty comfortable that someone didn't miss something. I lost myself here, but
Just a question, if I could jump in here, maybe, is the approval recommended by not only yourself, but DGR?
DGR recommended this IES. They've worked with them recently. They're actually still working with them on a project down by Dodge City, I believe. They've been a good contractor to work with. They kind of know what to look for in their not so good performing areas. So, says they all have them. So, but they're familiar with them, and they're a good contractor, and they finish their projects. So, the commission approved on the September 13th meeting to go ahead and go with IES as the low bidder.
Okay, sounds like that's a recommendation from the Utility Commission and the Power Superintendent. Does the council wish to take action and award this?
I'd make the motion to approve the bid from IES for the total of $2,999,408.32.
I would second, and I'm glad Marv introduced it because I can't even say numbers that high.
Okay, this is a resolution that Marv introduced and seconded by Jenny. Thank you both. And any final questions or comments?
I would just say that all these dollars that are expended then come back to the electric utility over years through the filing of the attachment O. So you can't beat that.
Okay, I've got to ask, what's the attachment? Oh, Marv.
Jason?
The attachment O is just a thing put in place to get people to invest in rebuilding transmission line and the resilience of the grid. So any equity that you put in to an approved project, which is approved by MISO, then gets a return over the life of the asset. So this has a 40-year asset, so we'll see a sizable return. We'll just put it that way.
Okay. And that goes into a restricted fund when that's
It goes back.
electric and,
Yeah, so it'll pay for itself, and it should allow for the next one to be constructed again 50, 60 years down the road, so.
okay, good enough. Okay, any more questions? Jim, did you have a question? Your mic's on.
No.
Roll call, please, Steve.
Sherman,
Yes.
Farig,
Yes.
Quaid,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Grunig.
Yes.
One final question. Will there be interruptions then during the process?
Yeah, I'm expecting some interruptions when we tie back into the sub. We'll do our best to do a generation as we did in the other outage, but I'm guessing they'll be longer than that 2-hour duration to tie these lines in. So, and there'll be other spots where there's feed underneath, underbuild circuits that are underneath that'll have to be transferred. So we'll do our best to loop around these circuits, but I'm sure there'll be some affected customers throughout this.
And
Process.
I didn't read it close enough. Could you tell us when the start date is approximately?
Well, the start date will probably be sometime in April. It's basically going to really depend on when they can get their equipment and supplies and materials. But there is a hard due date or completion date of August 30th. So
Of next year?
next year.
Wow, that's pretty quick build. Marv?
And you've got all your route approved and the easements in place. Everything's good to go.
Everything's good to go. We might have to do an extension on the MnDOT permit because they were only good for a year, and well, it's been a while, but that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, yep.
We're also getting out of the railroad right away mostly than some of our annual payments there, so we should see some reduction in some of our expense too.
Yeah, we'll see some annual payment reductions. The railroad's been charging us about $14,000 a year to be in there right away on an annual payment for a stretch, so.
That all sounds good. Give a chance to two electric guys to talk, and they do a good job. Oh, Jenny.
Just one thing, not about this, Jason, but the planned outage that we had before, did we see people have outage? I saw a lot of people comment they never saw any outage at their place, and so they wondered if it actually happened, if it was successful, or can you just speak to that?
So we did our planned maintenance due to the cooler weather that night, because it was a cool night, and Toro and High Life helped out extensively. They shed as much load as they could that evening, and the hospital was kind enough to run their generation and take their load off, along with the wastewater department. They ran theirs. So between those two running their generation, which saved about half of a meg, and we were just able to carry the load of the city through the night. So it was only about 4.5 megawatts. So we could go up to about 5 comfortably. So we were able to carry everybody through. We did have a few complaints on Facebook that they didn't get shut off, but because they did some preparation. But
Well, I think the majority appreciate it, so thank you for doing a great job. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, preliminary 2023 budget levy resolution. I think we'll have probably some discussion before the resolution, Steve.
That's fine. There's no resolution, just a motion. Oh, there is one at the back.
Yes, there is.
Setting the preliminary levy.
Yes.
Yep.
Imagine that. Okay, Steve, I'm gonna turn this over to you.
Introduction. Okay. Well, obviously, there's a lengthy memo and the back documentation in your council packets, but just kind of some of the highlights I had on the first page. I'll get to the recommendation kind of at the end, but one of the things we looked at, we went through our normal procedure where departments got their 6-month budgets, year-to-date numbers. We went through those with the department heads and looking at some of the price increases that we've seen for products, goods, services type of thing. We knew we'd have our kind of work cut out for us this year. So looking at some of the inflationary price increases on stuff, our all items CPI, Consumer Price Index, as everyone knows, was up considerably. July, it was 9.1%. Fuel prices were 49% higher when we budgeted than they were the year before. Price increases on equipment, we saw that with surcharges on the dump trucks and snowplows we approved at the last council meeting. Our health insurance was up, our workers' comp, property liability, auto values, all those things went up in value, so that bumped our premiums, and those are going to be up 10%. Our local government aid we get from the state, although it's great to get it, we're getting 1.25% more than we got last year, which obviously doesn't help us keep up. And then the legislature did not pass small cities improvement funding. Mr. Seifert was here at the last meeting from the coalition and talked about that. For Windom, that specifically last year, we got $77,244 out of that fund, and we use that for seal coating, crack filling, those kind of street maintenance activities. So going into 23, we will get 0. So some of those dollars, obviously we won't spend quite as much as we were able to spend last year, but still more of those costs are going to go on to the local budget than they were last year. So those are some key things in this. So as we put the budget together, we used kind of what we've done in the past. You talked earlier about what was in our capital budget. We budget usually around 200. We put 210,000 in this year just to give it a little increase because of some of the inflationary costs we've seen. So that's in there for preliminary capital. We did not include the use of any reserve funds. Last year we included some reserve funds in our budget. We did not put any in the operational budget this year for reasons we'll get into here a little bit later. So we're looking at all those things combined, and our recommendation is to do a 6.71% levy increase. That's about $152,000 additional to the city budget. Those cover general funds, special revenue funds, our debt service funds, things like that. Now, as we get to the end of the memo, one of the council's goals long-term had been to keep our tax rate competitive with our peer communities and really look at our tax rate. And tax rate and what the tax levy is are really kind of two different things. But even though our levy is going up, as suggested here, that 6.71%, when we got all our valuation statements on property, whether it was residential, commercial, or industrial property, all told in the city of Windom, that value went up 17% according to the county assessor. So if we had done a 17% levy, that would have essentially matched what the valuation went up and kept the tax rate the same. But we're proposing obviously somewhat less than that, which should continue to put downward pressure on our tax rate, which is really ultimately what we want in the end. So we're still continuing on that path. I know it's a large number and kind of a scary number, but actually our tax rate will continue to go down with this. We do have some American Recovery Plan funds, ARPA funds as they're known. We talked about those a little bit last year. In the memo this year, I've kind of laid some stuff out with Cheryl. We had the council had approved a purchase of a fire truck about 2 years ago. We got it We paid for the chassis with cash the first year, and then this year, the finished product came, and we owed about right at $240,000 yet on that. Our original plan for financing that at last year's budget was to take that balance of the fire truck and then look at those snow plow dump trucks that the council had moved forward with. That was about $400,000. We're going to put those two together on an equipment bond and bond for it and then pay that off over a period of time. Because of the delays in that truck order for the snow plows and dump trucks, we weren't quite able to line up the financing terms for there. So what we did is we funded the balance of the fire truck out of our general fund reserve. We had a good year at the end of last year in 21. We actually did a little better than we thought, so we funded that out of our general fund reserve. The dump truck snowplow funding that the council approved at the last council meeting, we had $25,000 in that account to start, but we still ended up being about $350,000 to $375,000 short. If we don't go for an equipment bond on that, our recommendation is to use the rest of the ARPA funds to pay for that. That way that we won't incur any additional debt, and then we won't have any ongoing payments, and we'll get kind of in one big chunk, we can get that done and spent on the fire truck and the snowplow equipment. So that is our recommendation. Certainly the council can, have discussion on it when we have budget meetings. As you remember, we also did spend a little bit of that money, about $20,000, for some PD radars, and we bought the drone. So we have about $455,000 or $450,000 left in that fund. So that's our plan for that. As I said, in our capital improvement plan, we budgeted $210, which is kind of our typical starting point. Our debt service levy, those are for the bonds that we've got outstanding, street department, street bonds, emergency services building payment, ice arena payment, those types of things. Comes out to $549,412. That is actually down considerably, almost $150,000 from last year, through a combination of things. So we're savings through some of our refinancings, but we also had a couple of projects, old projects, that were dropping off that queue. There were some 2013 bonds that were issued for fire truck and self-contained breathing apparatuses. That was a 10-year bond that's paid off, so that debt service dropped off, as well as a couple of other ones. So I think we had a street sweeper payment and something else. So that actually gave us a lot of flexibility. We probably would have come in at a much higher number if we didn't have that debt service reduction this year. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then so the general fund reserve, as kind of talk about this a little bit, our policy is to have between 35 and 60% of our funds in reserve. As we started the 2022 year, looking at our budget, right now we're looking at, we'd have about 70.3%. So we're at pretty good shape there. Now, with the funding of that fire truck coming out of the general fund reserves, and then we also have a couple of more bonds, as I noted, that are coming off the rolls that have negative balances in those accounts. We have to make those even when we close out those bonds. And so when we do that, our general fund reserve is pegged at 52.4% with those earmarks out of it. So that puts us right in that range of 35 to 60, a bit to the top end of that, but we're in that range. And then I talked about the property tax levy and the tax rate here. And so and I'm going to skip ahead a couple of these pages. When we look at our budget sources for the year from 22 to 23, you can see our general fund operational, that is going up about 90, not quite 90,000. There's personnel charges, health insurance, things like that are going in there, plus paying more for gas, paying more for insurance, those kind of things. Our capital, we're starting at 210, that's our spot. Dilapidated housing program, there still is some money in that account, but I know we've got a couple projects maybe pending, so we did put some dollars in to fund that for next year. Again, that's council can certainly lead that or not if they want. Special revenue funds, again, same type of operational expenses we talked about for the general fund. This one's up about 55,000. And then we had special revenue or special fund capital stayed the same as last year. So putting those things together, we're at just a little over 2.4 million. 2.404. Last year we were 2.253. That's that 152,000 that I had talked about earlier. So 151. So it's close. So that's where we're at with that. And then we have the capital projects. These are ones that have been requested that are in this CIP. The council will have their budget discussion later this year to kind of ferret some of those out and either move them around, fund them, not fund them, reduce them, add to them, whatever you choose to do. But these are the projects that are requested. This is where that debt service levy comes in. I spoke about where we're saving about 150,000 less this year in debt service levy than we had last year. You can see the street shop, the loader payment dropped off, and then we had we put the dump trucks in because we thought we were going to bond for it last year. So there's a line item for it, but we don't have anything in it because we ended up not doing that yet. The fire pumper we paid for, so there's nothing there. And then we had these couple, the 2005, 2007 street projects are dropping off, so we don't have debt service there. And then we had the fire equipment truck and SCBA that dropped off. So that's why there's a lower debt service levy this year. So, and then as I talked about the general fund reserve estimates, our audited reserve number from the end of last year was 2.8 million, and then we had the proposed use, actually the approved use of budget reserves for the 22 budget of 111,000, and then we have to close out those projects as I talked about, and then we had the remainder of the fire truck purchase. What isn't covered by ARPA would be another 117,000, so that's why that's what's balanced coming out of there from that 240 that we paid. And then we had the cul-de-sac that the council approved over by Dollar General and the car wash. We haven't done that yet. We're still working with MnDOT on those details. And then we had 10,000 that was committed for a prior nuisance abatement that we're still doing at our property. So that all totals up to about 725,000. So when you draw that off the audited reserve number, that gets us to that 52.4%. So that's kind of how we set this up. Like I said, all communities are going to be kind of in the same boat as far as trying to balance budget this year with the inflationary climate we're in. It is, like I said, it is kind of a big number, but just to kind of give you a little bit of flavor of a few other communities that are relatively close. Mountain Lake, we're going to do 9 on their preliminary levy. Laverne did 9.5. Worthington did 17. Fairmont did 8.4 and Jackson did 7.5. So, Councilmember Sherman, what Worthington was doing was capturing all of their growth, tax-based growth in the community and keeping their tax rate the same. So then that levy was just a function of that. So, but I certainly anticipate they're going to work their way to lower that. But just to give you some ideas, and you know, those are things that are local. LeSueur, which is one of our peer communities, they ended up at 16.82. So you're seeing some very, very high ones. Rochester, a big community, I talked to them today, they settled at 6.8. So we're kind of right in that ballpark. Marshall was going to be right around 10. So Springfield, they were the low ones on the poll here. They thought they were going to come in around 4, and that's Casson, which is another one of our kind of peer communities. They're at 8.4. So we can certainly work on this as through the budget meeting. So we maybe have a little more work this year to look at all the lines, but I think this is a very good starting point. Cheryl and I, department heads, everybody worked quite hard to get us to where we're at. And so we can turn it over to you guys for questions, comments. Cheryl, did you have anything you wanted to add to this or not right now? You did a good job. Okay. So
I have a question for Cheryl, though. Are you in agreement with Steve at the 6.71?
Could go higher just to capture some of that growth in the community, but
Another question I had quickly is, I'm just curious on equipment bonds. What kind of terms are you seeing there now? Yeah.
I didn't have Ellers run an equipment bond. Typically, those are 10-year runs. I did have them do a 20-year run for the generation building that we're looking at possibly for the electric department on a revenue debt bond, because that they would be revenue, not a GO. They would be a revenue bond, and 2-3 weeks ago they were looking at 4.6 to 4.8, and Fed's going to up 75 basis points tomorrow, so I suspect that's going to go a little bit higher. You know, if we do a GO equipment, it's a shorter term and it's backed by the general obligation. I would imagine we're probably still going to be in that 3 to 4 range on that. So that's about where we're investing our monies right now with our reserve. We're in that 3 range as CDs come due, so we're basically kind of revenue neutral on whether we're borrowing or spending at this point. But like I said, our recommendation was we have to use the ARPA funds by the end of '24, and so we had 2 very good capital projects and kind of take big chunks out of them, and that's hence the recommendation to do that rather than take on debt at this point. So
The current 2022 budget probably didn't anticipate some of these inflationary numbers. How do you anticipate the year end is going to look?
So as we were going through this, we looked at, okay, where are we at right now? And so we're continued to watch since July when we put these numbers together. CPI has come down to the, mid 8s, from 9.1 to mid 8s. We know what our insurance is, that's pretty much locked in. We know what our health insurance is, we locked in. We know what our labor costs are, that's locked in. So it's looking at some of those other variables, what our chemicals are going to cost, things like that. And so as we went through that, we built in with the department heads a little bit of wiggle of what we thought it was going to be. And so some places we took a little out. Natural gas was one of them. Cheryl doubled it and added the 10%. And so I was like, no, we're not quite going to do that. So we came down a little bit. But we still left quite a bit of, some wiggle in there because we don't want to come back and say, hey, we're going to be way short. So we've tried to bake that into the numbers and then look at, as best we can, the crystal ball, what's happening with the market right now. And so that's the approach that we had to take because it's kind of a unknown at this number, but we did the best we could to anticipate this.
And Steve, if the feds do raise interest rates again 2 more times in the coming months, how will that affect us? Or will it directly affect us?
Our debts, right now, all of our debt's locked in, and we've refinanced pretty much everything we've got, and we're able to refinance those. And the rates that we've got on, like the 2020 street project, we weren't at a call date on those, but still, given the current interest rate environment, we're still at a very good rate. So I don't know that we'll have an opportunity to refinance. But with the interest rates moving ahead, it's really going to have two impacts. One, of course, is what are we able to spend our dollars for, and can we do it with cash? Should we do it with cash? Should we look at it with debt? Right now, with our debt, our debt is lower than what we're getting on return on our investments. However, if we take out new debt, like for the generation building, that was a revenue bond at even 3 weeks ago at 4.6 or 4.8%. There'll have to be a judgment there. Do we want to pay more with cash or not? And that's kind of the call. So that higher interest rate is going to have those 2 impacts to us. What do you want to look at for debt, and what do you want to look at for investments? Right now, the yield curve is actually, as of today, I looked at it, it's inverted. Your 2-year rate is returning more than what your 10-year rate is. Now, it's only by a handful of basis points. However, your 2-year rate was right around that 4%, and your 10-year rate was 3.95 or 3.92, whatever. So right now the yield curve is a little, inverted. So we'll see what happens after the Fed takes action tomorrow. But those are the two places really going to impact us, and so we'll need to be kind of looking at that with our crystal ball when we get to larger debt issuances. Like I said, I think the next upcoming one might be that generation building. I know we're looking at a 2024 street project, so we'd be looking at issuing bonds there. So I'm hoping that the markets maybe settle out a little bit before we get to that next big purchase. So.
Steve, when's the final action of the council?
Well, the preliminary levy needs to be done by the 30th of September, and then we will have our budget workshops 27th of September, 11th of October, 25th of October, and then time permitting or not, you go through those capital items that are getting tax revenue. We can either do that one of those meetings or have another meeting. But our first council meeting in December is when we have the public hearing on the budget, and then by the end of December, we need to enact a budget. We typically then do that at the second council meeting of December, so I think it's the 18th. I think it's the 21st. Yeah, the 7th is the budget hearing, and the 21st of December would be the final, so.
I guess my comment on why I'm asking that is, do you see much impact by the midterm elections? Either way, I mean, I'm just curious if.
Elections always have some type of impact now.
Yeah,
I don't, that's a
no,
very good question, Mr. Mayor, and I don't know. There'll
But
be a
there's
lot that depends on what happens with the Fed's actions. They've set a target of 4 or 4.25. Yeah, right, and so they're still going there. They're going rather aggressively with 2.75 basis points increases. But if they're going to take a lull there and then see what happens for a few months, or whether they're going to stay on their path, I don't know.
I'm just, yeah, I'll be right with you, Jenny. I was just, my question is, you know, either way, it's gonna potentially affect how we're looking at things come budget discussion. That's it. Jenny?
I was just going to mention, I was surprised actually that we're at the 6.75. I think was actually kind of low from what I was expecting. I was recently at a Southwest Regional Development Commission meeting, and a lot of the mayors from the surrounding areas that were there were talking about how they were probably in the double digits for their levy. And they were just hoping maybe they could eke by, and get right under the 10 mark. But a lot of them were thinking it may be, into the double digits. So I'm surprised we're here. So I think, if it was even a little bit more set at, because it's not to exceed that, we can't, so even though we may set it just a little bit higher, we can always come lower. I just don't want to get caught where we set it too low that when we get to budget and looking at everything, then we're like, shoot, we maybe should have been a little higher.
Other comments, Marv?
I was just going to say, if you knew the impact of the election, I was going to ask you if you knew what property values would do in the future.
My 401k would be in much better condition if I could call the market.
I'm not gonna say what I was thinking, Steve.
Okay, so,
But-
I mean,
but
but
I-
to the
I
finance
was-
director's point, I mean, we talked about, should it be, a little higher and capture more of the growth that we're having now? And, some of it is impact to subsequent years as well. I mean, we look at our budget picture 5 years out, and there are some more unknowns in '24, because we have a labor agreement through '23. We don't have one for '24 and beyond. So that could have a pretty big impact to us as well. So we may be looking at a fairly, similar or even a little bit higher next year, depending on what happens with the economy. So, I kind of want to be fairly consistent. I don't want to go, super high this year and then, so then we're, low next year, or vice versa, be too low this year and we got to be double digits plus next year. That I kind of look ahead a little bit on trying to, smooth it out as best we can. I'm certainly not opposed to adding a little to it, but I was trying to be kind of in that neighborhood of, some of our colleagues and seeing some of those at 7.5, 8, high 6s. You kind of put us in there because we could do it. Now, there's always something, we'd like to have for capital purchase, and I know it's always a struggle to fund that stuff. So I'm not opposed to it, but I wanted to bring you kind of a status quo of what we've done in the past, and this is what it is. And obviously, the council can add to it or take it away. But Councilmember Quaid is quite right. It can always go down, but it can't go up. So this is your opportunity if you so wish.
When you read us that list of our peers and what theirs were, and you can take credit for it if you want to, Steve, is how come we're lower? Is it the growth cycle we're in Windom now helping us? Is it, evaluations? I mean, that's went up, but
I think statewide values went up fairly similar amounts when you look at the information from the State Department of Revenue. Every city is different and everybody has different things coming up. They may have had a new labor agreement, and we're all service-heavy industries. So there might have been more of an impact because maybe they've already settled for future years. Maybe they've got a project that's coming online on debt where ours were coming off. If we still had that $150,000 on our debt service levy that we had last year, you'd be looking at 14%, 13.5% this year for a Windom. So it's just a timing issue of how our budget fell. Is
or
really what
if
it
you
is.
wanted to fund all of the emergency equipment that USDA kicked in, items, which I don't know what that equate, maybe it's not that much, but
Be 170,000, so that's another 7% to your levy. Yeah, yep.
okay, council, other questions? This is not an easy task for you tonight, but I think, thank you, Cheryl and Steve, for providing all this information. Year after year, it seems like we're coming out, pretty fair. So, Jason, you got a question?
I had a question for Council Member Quaid. You mentioned about going a little bit higher. Do you have a recommendation?
I don't, that was going to be my next thing, is to confer with Steve and Cheryl here as far as where they thought our kind of limit would be, or what they think when, Cheryl kind of inkled that maybe she was looking at a little bit higher. And I know Steve is very conservative, and I think Cheryl is too, but I'd like to see what they think.
Every 1% of the levy is 24,000. So that will give you a little bit of guidance. So if you think you want to add $100,000 to the budget for capital equipment or other expenses, that's, essentially right at, 4%. So that gives you a little bit of a guide to it. So if you had something in mind like funding Castle Kingdom, then, that's a number. But I don't have a particular number in mind. I guess I'd like to stay under the double digits, to be 100% honest with you. Because I get phone calls then as well as you do. So, and it makes our economic developer job a little bit tougher.
Right.
Cheryl, she asked, do you have an opinion?
That adds up quickly.
I don't, if we're considering that for capital, what big ticket items, I mean, you know, to me, I'd want to know that now. Even though you can come down, I understand that. But with the intent, you don't have to spend it. I mean, or I want to hear the big ticket items. Where's that money going to go to? Right? I mean, that's the decision. If you have $75,000 to spend, are you going to count on that and put it into a debt retirement thing for something and put a big ticket item on?
Well, if you wanted a item to fund, you could pick the $78,000 that you needed to fund tonight to do the USDA matches for the last project. And then we'd have our normal 200 and some thousand in our capital budget that we normally had. So if you want one thing to say, this is what we're gonna fund with an extra 3%.
3%.
That would do it, if you're looking for something like that.
Well, you answered my question. I mean, that would be that'd be a fair statement, but. Okay, council, you need to have discussion. And I will be quiet.
9.71 is too ugly a number for me.
$9.5 better? And just knowing that we said it, we can come down from that. I mean, we can be at the 6 or 5 maybe, you know, but I just feel like every time we get into discussions when we sit down and do all our budgets and everybody comes to us with all their requests and all their, you know, wish lists, and then we have to sit there and try to cut out things. You know, the pool, I mean, not that this, you know, 3% is going to make a dent, but, you know, the pool is something that we've always been talking about and never put money towards. Castle Kingdom and issues that we have there. We have other, you know, things that need to be improved in our parks. You know, and that's just, you know, I'm looking at just committees I sit on and what I see. I know that other people sit on other committees for other departments that probably have needs and wants and things as well. And I hate always cutting everything out when our community is growing and the assets and things that we have in our community, amenities that we have, we need to highlight and we need to put some money towards. And it's not just building new stuff, but it's maintaining what we have. It costs money to maintain, you know, when we get new buildings like new shelters and new things like that, we need to maintain them. Where's the money we have budgeted to do all that kind of stuff? So we need to be planning ahead that way too.
We could take a modifying position at 8 or 8.1, and then certainly we could go down even below 6.7 in the end. But then it gives us some discussion point, maybe. So I would be willing to make a motion to set the preliminary tax levy at 8.0.
I would second that.
I'll just say there's a
number quick.
I will.
So, thank
I'm
you.
just gonna say there's a motion on the table, and that did receive a second for 8% is the preliminary levy number. And we'll wait here until Steve has a number.
The number would be $2,433,665. So you're picking up $29,000 with your 1.3% increase.
Any discussion on the motion and second?
The number again is $2,433,665. Jenny second.
Yeah, Jenny seconded it.
Thank you.
Okay, one We'll see if it's the last time. I'll ask one more time for any questions or comments.
Yes, I want to remind him, and obviously we all understand that, in the public too, that the number may indeed go south of 6.71. So that's a discussion we'll have. It just gives us a little wiggle room. Yeah.
Any other final comments? I am going to call for the vote. All in favor
Roll call. It's a resolution.
to, so the resolution was introduced by Jason and seconded by Jenny, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In the amount
As
that-
amended.
As amended, as Steve read, with the dollars, I think is included in that, right?
Correct.
The total dollars raised. Okay, everybody on board? Steve? Roll call.
Grunig,
Yes.
Farag,
Yes.
Quaid,
Yes.
Sherman,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
That carries. Thank you for the discussion once more. Thank you, Steve and Cheryl. Appreciate that. That's department heads getting this preliminary done. I think that was good work. And still, we're yes, okay. We'll see where everybody in the communities land. That'll be interesting when everybody gets done. Okay.
I still have a little, I'm still a learner. This inflation, this stuff that's going on right now is going to get a lot worse between now and the first of the year, regardless of who. But it is what it is, I guess.
That's why the city council members get paid the big bucks. No, you're not missing anything. Okay. Citywide cleanup ad hoc committee report. I didn't get to read all of that, but who's the chair of that? Was Jenny? All right, Jenny, do you want to give the highlights of that?
Well, we met, me and Councilmember Gafarig, met with Hometown. Donna from out at the landfill was there, Denise from the city, and Steve. And we actually had pictures, so that brings it more into clarity, I think, when you see pictures of what things looked like last year. I think every year I feel like things get put out earlier and earlier on the curb, and so our town looks messier for a longer period of time before cleanup. But we kind of talked about some of the issues that we had of excessive amounts of commingling of trash. Well, if there's a picture up there for you. You know, it said in the ad clear that you weren't supposed to have things in plastic bags, you know, like garbage bags, because that's hazardous for the people picking it up. They don't know what's in those bags. They don't know what they're disposing of. Things are not supposed to be commingled. You're supposed to have like your electronics, your appliances, your mattress, things sorted out so they're easier. You know, like Donna talked about from the landfill, they come around and they just pick up mattresses. Well, a lot of people put the mattress out and then they put all their stuff on top of it. So when they come just to get the mattress that they're supposed to get, they have to take all that stuff off, then get their mattress, and then things could have got broke. There could be glass, there could be mirrors, things like that. And then, you know, when Hometown comes and picks up their stuff, they're having to try to pick up everything out of your lawn that is a mess. We had a lot of issues, I think, with our appliance people that came to recycle appliances. Scrappers or people were coming through town before the appliance people came and were taking the things of value or cutting off the cords for appliances, things like that. So when the appliance recyclers got here, they really didn't have anything that was too much value to them. So actually our appliance recycler is not going to come back and do that again. We're not going to have that service. So appliances will have to go, you know, out to the landfill. They're going to have to be recycled on your own. That's not going to be something that we're going to be able to offer as a curbside pickup in the future. So that wasn't even, like, we talked about it, but we don't have any option. That's not gonna happen moving forward. The electronics, we talked about that. You know, that's the same issue that they had. All the, like they'd call good stuff was gone, and they were left over with the stuff that wasn't something that they would really value in collecting. So that's not going to be at the curbside either. We did talk with the county. They always do one time a year where they have electronic recycling, where you can come and drive through and drop off your electronics. They would be open to trying to do that twice a year. And then maybe trying to coordinate the day that we do our spring cleanup, that the landfill would be open and they would take appliances and electronics, all that stuff the same day. And paint, you know, all different things. So we kind of talked about how you could have this stop where you just, you know, that's the day we set, and you just make your little route and drop your stuff off at the places you need to. Car seats was another thing. Those can be recycled free of charge, and that has to be in a separate place as well. And a lot of that was mixed in with things. So that's a separate thing as well. We still would have to do tags for mattresses, because that, you know, we want to continue to pick up mattresses. But overall, kind of the discussion was, and what we lean towards for future ideas is maybe moving towards having just bulk items picked up on your curb. So this would be things that are, and we've tried to say this before, but I don't think it really was hitting home, so I think we need to be more strict with it, I guess. These are things that will not fit in your garbage bin. These are larger items. These are couches, tables, end tables, reclining chairs, you know, bigger things like that. That's what would be on your curb for pickup, and that's what then Hometown would come around and pick up on that recycling day. Then your smaller, bulkier items, and I'd like to say like things you could fit in your car, those would be things that we talked about having 2 sites in Windom on each side of town, and having large roll-offs that Hometown staff would man. And then on that day, maybe from like 7 to 4 or something like that for hours, anybody can go there and drop off your stuff. It can't be, you know, bagged up in bags type of thing. It has to be, you know, bigger items that you would come and drop off there. If it's small items that fit in your garbage bag, then it fits in your garbage can. And that's how it should be disposed of. So really, overall, people shouldn't be stockpiling your garbage all year long to just put it on your curb once a year. And so we're trying to find a way to make it easier, safer, a little bit cleaner cleanup by just having the bulk items out, things that we know that are difficult for you to haul somewhere to get rid of, that are easier to just put on your curb, and then the things that are stuff that you could manage, you know, in like the front seat of your car. Those are things that you would take to these drop-off places that we'd have on each side of town. And then we looked at the fee. Then, you know, obviously that's less man hours, less manpower for Hometown. We're hoping that then maybe our contract with them, the amount may come down. I mean, yes, they still have 2 different roll-off sites that they'll have to have staff at, and they'll still have the people coming around to pick up the big stuff. But maybe that would mean we could do it twice a year, and we could offer it in the spring and the fall, which would then make both of us happy, because I was for spring cleanup and Lisa was for fall cleanup. So we were looking at, and Hometown thought that that could be a win-win situation for everyone as well. So those are things that we were looking at.
I have a question for Councilmember Quaid. You guys had talked about the aesthetic look. Obviously, the large piles sitting there for 5 months, or no, for a couple months is a little longer. Have you thought about how long before the actual date it would be acceptable to put stuff out?
We didn't talk about a time frame or anything, but we've kind of talked about how every year we've kind of always said, you know, hold off, you know, because we know the weather, the rain, you know, really, I mean, we talked about just with taking stuff to the landfill, you know, they pay per how much it costs, you know, like how much it weighs. And so a couch that you just put out there compared to a couch that sat through a snow and 3 rains, we're paying more to get rid of that couch then. You know, so if you think about it, it saves money overall if everybody waits till the week of pickup to put their things out and not have them out for a month getting through so much weather. But, you know, I think we encourage that every year. At least I know on council I've always said that, you know, hold off to putting your stuff out till this week. And we still continue to see people putting stuff out early. So we'll just continue. And that's, we talked about more promoting, more social media, more promoting with, you know, hometown and with the city. You know, I said maybe we need to have some pictures in the paper as far as like all these garbage bags with a big X. That's not, you know, the thing to do. And then putting, you know, just your table, your chair, whatever, put that out. Yes, you know, check mark, that's what we want. Just making it really clear, because I think the ad, we had so much wording that people either didn't read it all or just was like, oh, you know, it's just overwhelming. So I think try to simplify it and try to just put more information out there ahead of time.
One more
Question.
Oh, sorry.
My question was going to be, let's not forget about the elderly that cannot make them trips either, that count on somebody coming to their front curb. Their grandkids may take it out to the curb or whatever, but, you know, they don't have the ability to take some of the items to somewhere, you know, my opinion. But
And those would be the small items that would go into your normal trash bin.
well,
Which you
I
should have.
disagree with that too. But respectfully, I appreciate all you did. But I think that, I think it gives, I don't get why you can't put stuff in a bag. Cleanup day prompts some people, including myself, to clean out my back garage. And I'll get the contractor's bags, and they're large. And my items that, yes, through the year could have went in, well, no, they can't. It's full. Okay, but, you know, I'm just saying that, why can't you put pillows? Pillows could fit in your garbage can, right? But, you know, if I'm cleaning up and you have a back garage and you want to clean it up, I think I don't know what's wrong with that. Is give me a chance once a year to get the big contractor bags, put them in a bag, everything that's legal. That's my thing, is what's legal. Don't hide it, you know, in the bags, but that's just my opinion. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening.
I think that was some of the issue too. We had a lot of building materials. We had pictures where there was tons of building or demolition stuff, things that weren't to be picked up. And so if we see big contractor bags or dark bag that you don't know what's in it, you don't know if people, you know, are putting some kind of electronic or putting something, and then that's more time and safety of the hometown putting that into their, you know, big machines, as far as what kind of, you know, things people are putting in these bags, and they don't really have the time to go through and look at every bag. And I agree, if you have pillows and big comforters and things like that, if you put one of them in your regular garbage bin during the week, that's gonna fill it up quickly. So that I'd consider something that you could easily put in your car and bring to one of those roll-offs and throw in. So if I've got, you know, 5 comforters over the year I want to get rid of now, then I'll go to one of those side and throw it. Or maybe I'll talk to the animal rescue and see if they need some, you know, dog bedding or something like that. You know, there's recycling and things like that we can try to do as well.
I understand. I just don't want it to hinder the nuisance ordinance with clutter, you know, that can be coming up in some residences and be left there instead of, I can't get rid of it.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too far into that, but I feel that the places that we've had in the community that have been more the nuisance things aren't the ones that I see putting stuff on the curb. Okay, there are properties where I wish I could go and put their stuff on the curb when it's cleanup time. So I think this is just our average person. I think, you know, we even heard, you know, some of the items that were coming in were from people maybe from other towns bringing it in and putting it on people in Windom's, you know, front yard. And it's like, okay, well, you know, if you can drive it all the way in from the country, you can swing by the landfill and drop it off there too. But, you know, in the city of Windom, you are paying that fee to have this service. And if we can offer it twice a year and do it in this way, I think that would be wonderful. Maybe you won't have such a pile up to have so much stuff to put out. There was a little talk about whether we should limit the number of bulky items in that you can put out. I feel like we should just, go with it. We haven't limited the number of bulky items or any items out there other than the things you need to have tickets for. So I don't know that I would agree with doing that, but I think it could get to that point if people really abuse it, that we do have to do something like that.
One quick question. Will the ad hoc committee be bringing forth a recommendation for specific dates, like in the spring and the fall? I meant, do you have something, 2 dates there? We're going to talk
Yeah,
about.
I think the dates that we looked at for 2023 was May 20th and September 16th. We coordinate with when the landfill is open on that Saturday for them. Obviously, the roll-offs to be emptied so they can keep going those 2 days. And also if we're going to do appliance and electronic and paint and all that kind of stuff for people to get, And I, would suggest too that we maybe have little maps or little something where the roll-offs are, so that if people come there and they have some of these other things and they're not familiar with Windom, that we can say, hey, here's where to go for the landfill and that's where these items go. And people, and I kind of, I guess, joked, but I said, like how Duffy's does this triple stop thing and you can get a t-shirt, maybe you recycle and you put your garbage and all this and then you get this t-shirt that.
It sounds like trash talk to me. Is the May 20th and September 16th, are they hard dates now? Or are they potential? We'll have to...
Yeah, I think we need to hear back from Hometown for
Okay,
sure,
so we
but
have some time.
that's
Couple
between
months.
Hometown and the county landfill. Those were dates that they looked at that were available right now. But, other places can lock in dates with them as well, so.
Well, I want to thank you and the committee for looking at this, even with my comments. May sounded negative, but I think it's good that you looked at all the different situations. I appreciate that. And so this just FYI tonight, or a consensus that we kind of move in this direction, or what are you thinking?
Well, I think it would be good to have what the council wants to do versus, do you want to try to do it twice a year? Do you want to stick with the once a year? If it's once a year, is it spring or fall? We got to try to lock these dates in. The sooner the better with Hometown and the county. And then to know, are we going to do like we've always done and just do everything on the curb? Or are we going to try to do bulky items and then have the 2 roll-offs?
Yeah, and I think Hometown also was looking for direction on that because, they weren't supposed to pick up trash bags with things in it, but then, then there was some discussion about, that should get picked up, and so then they started doing it, and then they didn't do it, and we need to be very clear on what they can and cannot do and what we're going to do, have for service.
Well, I would recommend next council, I was going to recommend next council meeting, you have your list of questions that needs to be answered, bring them to the council, and we'll act on each one of them. Marv?
Are we financially able to do twice?
It depends on what we're doing. Right now, what we're collecting is right about what we're paying. So we were a little over a couple years, we were a little under, so it kind of evens itself out. The fee hasn't changed since 2009, which is that $1 a month. As Councilmember Quaid pointed out, if there are drop-off sites and it saved Hometown time from having to go and physically pick everything up to somebody standing there, monitoring a dumpster, that would be a lot less time on their half. And then because we can't do recycling of appliances and electronics, there's no cost to that for us. It'll go hopefully through the county's dates. So we're hoping that there's a cost savings on it, that maybe we then would be able to offer it, but it depends on how much stuff comes out, if we get the tipping reduced from the county, that kind of thing. So the mattresses, that's kind of it kind of pays for itself more or less, so that's kind of a wash. But we'd really have to do it 1 year to figure out how it goes, and it depends on what you direct us to do. If you say, hey, let's do it like we've always do it, but try to tighten it up, then there's probably no hope of doing it twice and covering the cost, unless we looked at the fee or made some other adjustment. If you want to say, hey, you know what, we're just gonna provide roll-offs, everybody just bring your stuff out there and do no curbside, yeah, you could probably do it 2 times or maybe even more, but.
One quick little thing, is there any way to get an approximation of different prices or costs for doing it once versus twice and seeing those numbers?
Yeah, I don't know if we'd have them by the next time we meet, but I know Hometown was looking into that because they were hoping that there would be enough savings that we maybe could offer it twice and still be within that same range, but, you know, till they look into it a little more, it's hard to say.
I think really tightening up what gets to the curb makes a lot of sense, and then having additional drop-offs definitely is good ideas. Just hopefully everybody would comply.
Is that agreeable, bringing the questions for the council to act on next meeting? Steve?
Either next meeting or when we get something back from Hometown, because, you know, if we wait to have that
Understand.
cost, if Mike said, hey, can you give me, you know, till the end of October, I think we can maybe do that. You do have some budget meetings coming up too that, you know, if we had to sneak this in onto one part of the budget discussion, because there is a cost to it, we could, you know, have it then as well. So, you know, either way.
Okay, as soon as you get your information together, put together a list of questions and probably run those questions by everyone, right, in your committee, Hometown and whatever. Okay, sound good, council? Okay, thank you again. Okay. Call for a public hearing, residential tax abatement, Gove Acres, Lot 4, Block 2. Jim?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Well, since I've been here, I've probably done 6 or 7 of these, so you're probably aware of the program by now. So I won't go through all the details on it, but it's a 5-year program. Tax abatement of real estate taxes on the increased market value of a new commercial project is basically the gist of that. So we did receive a request for abatement on a proposed new home to be constructed at 1923 Bud Road, also known as Gove Acres. And just a side note, they have 7 lots sold out of 16. But pursuant to Minnesota statute, it's necessary to hold a public hearing. And so the attached is a proposed resolution calling for a public hearing to be held at the next council meeting on October 4th. So as far as fiscal impact, based on the estimated value of $210,000 and the 2022 tax rates, the estimated tax abatement for the city would approximately be $1,507.37. Times that by 5, you get $7,536.85. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the attached resolution calling for a public hearing on the proposed tax abatement for a new residential project at 1923 Bud Road for October 4th.
Council action? Well explained.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I would introduce the resolution calling for the public hearing for the proposed tax abatement for 1923 Bud Road.
I'll second.
Resolution introduced by Marv, seconded by Jenny. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Farig,
Yes.
Grunig,
Yes.
Sherman,
Abstain.
Nelson,
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
And that resolution carries. Okay, we're on to new business. Okay, under old business, I am going to entertain some action on some old business. Information was put at your chair, and the chief is here tonight to explain and introduce and talk about his request that he's followed up on. You've had that advertised for quite some time now, I understand?
Yeah.
So, there you go.
we ran advertising for, I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks. We had our tryouts this past Saturday. We had 8 applicants come in, 5 show up for tryouts. We put those 5 through 6 physical fitness tests, a written test, an oral interview, and we scored them and ranked them on their abilities and how they did on those tests and physical fitness items. So our recommendation is to put 4 of the 5 on to the fire department. I don't know if you want me to read their names or not. And this is in no order. Aaron Hernandez, Jacob Schaefer, London Cruz, and Matthew Ellingston.
And your recommendation is to approve these 4 for hire?
That is my recommendation, yes.
Okay, any questions from the council? Okay, we all knew this was hopefully coming, and we sure appreciate the applicants that you had. And with that, I'd entertain someone to make the motion to make the hires of the aforementioned new fire department employees.
I would make that motion to approve the 4 new hires for the fire department.
Second.
Welcome aboard.
Absolutely. Motion by Jenny, seconded by Jason. Any discussion? I'd just add, thank you, Ben, for leading that and getting this done. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you much, guys.
Any other old business? Jenny?
I just wanted to bring up, under old business, we had talked about the THC products and that information, and we did that memorandum for, or the moratorium for up to a year. In that, we talked about that monthly we would update and talk about our progress, where things were at. And so I just wanted to, put that out there that we do need to be looking at that and addressing that every month. Just in what I'm seeing and hearing and those kind of things. There was some talk that, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, that the League of Minnesota Cities was having a committee. Was that the correct entity?
They have a working group together. They released last
draft.
week on Thursday, not a draft. They did not do any templates for licensing or anything like that. They feel the state should do that. So they put out some guidance on just like on employment, law enforcement, things like that. And I can certainly provide that to the group, but they just put that out last week. There are a couple of cities I'm aware of that are working on licensing. City of Austin approved licensing. So they approved that, I think, a couple of weeks ago at their council meeting, had their vote on that. Golden Valley was still working on it. I'm not sure exactly where they're at in their process. Their city administrator hadn't returned my phone call, so I'm not sure where they're at. But I know that they're working on licensing for that.
So I just overall, I had heard, and that was again when I was at the Southwest Regional Development Commission meeting, a lot of different local officials talk. And so I had heard that, and then I actually got forwarded, information on what kind of came out of that working group. So I was reading through that. So just the public knows that we are looking at this. This is something that we're, I'm continuing to look into it between each meeting we have. Something that I think just monthly we should probably just put on our agenda under old business to talk about and bring up if there's any changes. And also just so people are aware, it's not just the licensing and zoning, it's the enforcement. If we do have that and it's being sold here, how do we know that what's being sold is at the level that's what it's supposed to be or under that's legally, like if you have a bag of like THC gummies, how do you know that it's at 5 nanograms or less? What type of technology or things are out there for law enforcement to use to be able to know these things? It's not just, are we selling it to somebody under 21? We can card somebody, but also how do we know that what the levels are that are being sold locally? Another thing that I guess I didn't think about in reading and hearing things was this just isn't about selling that product. You could have a processing plant want to come into your town and say, we want to start processing these THC materials. And they're saying that there's a lot of odor to these processing plants. So that's something to consider when we're looking at, what we can allow and what we can't allow, and then where we'd allow these type of things to happen. If somebody wants to come in and put a processing plant, well, then where within the city would we want to allow that with the possible odors that could give off? So there are additional things. Like when I first saw this, I was like, okay, well, why should we do any kind of moratorium? Like, let's just let this happen. And as research, there is a lot more information and things we need to get. So, but I still think that it can be done in under a year. But I think, with how slow moving a lot of government things are and getting information out and getting changes made, it is still going to take some time. But I just want to make sure the public knows we are looking into this. We are still considering things, and we will continue to update this monthly.
And also, Council Member Quaid, there's also the issue of possession, because it's not just buying and selling, but there's no real guidance on if children can actually have a bag of gummies on them and traveling. Is that a problem? Is that something that we want to do something about, and those types of things?
Any other questions? Okay, I have none. Let me see. Any other old business? One more time. Okay, hearing none. We are on to council comments. Jim, come on. Marv?
I would just once again thank Quick Trip and Bob Byers for the donations. And as we've gone through this entire year, we've seen a lot of donations to different entities. And I would just say that philanthropy is alive and well in Windom.
Very good comments. Lisa?
I just want to say once again, come out and support your Windom Eagles. They need your support.
Jenny?
I'd like to, again, recognize the Good Samaritan Society for their 100 years. That was my first job growing up in Windom when I was 16, is going and working as a nursing assistant, and it's a very rewarding job. I think during the COVID time, the workers up there, just phenomenal. When the own family members couldn't go up and visit people at the nursing home, the employees there were the family for those people at the nursing home. So just, a big shout out to all the employees at Good Samaritan for the excellent service they provide. And then Quick Trip, amazing open house, and, seeing all the traffic through there. I think it's going to be a wonderful asset to the community. And that's all I have.
Jason?
Yes, sir. I was there for the opening day, and it was nice. Great place to be. We're glad that they are here, along with all the other businesses that are making a go of it, and we're so glad for that. And of course, we're very grateful for the fact that the emergency services personnel were so on it with that fire over at High Life. I mean, it could have been much worse, right? What if we had a different situation? But we're very thankful, and kudos to all those who were part of that effort. And obviously, the damage has been largely or completely fixed already, so we're thankful for that, and just want to wish everyone a great week.
Thank you. And I'll give you just a moment here in a minute. Steve, did you have anything? Okay. Well, I'm going to go for you then, because Steve went with me on a couple grand openings, and I want to first thank Culligan for joining our community. They had an open house and grand opening, so welcome to them, and also to Quick Trip and their donation to the police department. By Bob Byers' family estate, thank anybody involved in that. Your thoughts are and donation are very well accepted here, and we truly appreciate that from the whole city of Windom. I'm thankful that the fire department got their work done. Steve, anything else that you can think of tonight before I sign off? Are we good?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Marv?
Was there much feedback on the striping going out to Quick Trip?
I think there's a lot of feedback on the striping going out to Quick Trip. That was not necessarily, I don't believe, what was envisioned here, because we were told from the bridge going south, and I think it crept into town a lot further than that, just from the appearance of it. The start of the merge is way too close to the intersection, and that causes a bottleneck in that queue right there, and I think it's kind of a mess. So we will be speaking with MnDOT and see what their experience has been so far. I know there's some concerns about it, and we're looking at that, yeah. So
I would agree. Those turn lanes come up really fast, turn off 71 heading north, and you can't get back to the Quick Trip lane. And for the one time I was there. But, you know, I totally agree. And I had phone calls. I was in Oklahoma, and I had 4 phone calls. And I have not received phone calls for a long time, but that really hit the ticket. So thank you, Steve, for your comments on that. I appreciate that. And I look forward to, what MnDOT sees. I think the purpose was, right, if I recall right, is a trial period. We're getting a trial period, but I envisioned something much different. 3 lanes with 1 turning lane is how I understood it. But anyway, so we'll look forward to a response, Steve, when you get a hold of MnDOT and find out. That would be good. Let them explain it. Okay.
tell them that the council would like an update on that, and I'll invite them.
I'm curious. We have our assistant chief here. Have you had issues out there in the patrol or any close accidents? I'm just curious more than anything. Yeah, you might want to just sit down because, no, I won't make it too long. But just a question on, we were discussing the striping on the south part of town. Did you see any occurrences or disgruntled people or any accidents, anything of that nature that you're aware of?
No accidents yet, but as I drive through that, I'm seeing a lot of times where, especially when you see semis that don't know the area, they're in that right-hand lane and they're well into the striping before they can actually move over. So that is a struggle, but I haven't heard any complaints or anything like that yet, but no accidents either. So.
Okay. I guess that's as good as it can be, so we'll leave it up to MnDOT sometime in the near future to give us an explanation and why the striping was put down like it was. Okay. With that, we're adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you all.